Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Kip Wainscott. I'm a senior advisor at the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, and I lead our outpost here in Silicon Valley. And we're a democracy NGO. For more than 35 years, NDI has worked around the world to strengthen and support democracy. And we work across offices in 60-plus countries. We support programming in many others. But our office and our work here in Silicon Valley is really a reflection of the transformational impact that technology has had on democracy in recent decades. And I'd say one of the central challenges confronting the democracy community in the digital age and in the context of AI specifically is information disorder and combating disinformation. And we know, for example, that elections are neither free nor fair if voters aren't able to assess relevant political information, and citizens can't hold their governments to account if they aren't fairly positioned to evaluate public information. And of course, these aren't new challenges. Disinformation, it certainly long predates the advent of social media and of AI. You'll encounter the topic in the political commentaries of Edmund Burke and James Madison, and it's occurred in a variety of contexts throughout history. But the threat has evolved, and I think unquestionably technology and AI have helped to shape and accelerate that evolution such that the threat now moves at a greater speed, a greater scale, and with greater precision and ease than at any time in human history. But I am encouraged today to be introducing this next session, which is really a demo segment. We've invited our speakers to present on some of the positive ways that AI is being used to help to combat the malign misuses of AI and technology in society. And so I'm very excited to introduce our speakers. I'm going to invite them all up to the stage, and we'll be hearing from them momentarily. But first up will be Dr. Marc Warner. Dr. Warner is the CEO of Faculty, which he co-founded in the belief that the benefits of AI should extend to everyone. Faculty helps other organizations develop and deploy artificial intelligence in the real world through a combination of technology, expertise, and education. He's overseen the growth of the company and has led more than 50 data science projects with clients ranging from multinational companies like EasyJet and Siemens to the UK government and NHS. Welcome, Marc. Next up, then, we'll hear from Karina Halevy. Karina is a Los Altos High School senior, a Stanford AI for All 2016 alum, and the founder of LingHacks, an international nonprofit that convened the world's first high school computational linguistics conference and hackathon. Fusing her fluency in 5 languages and her penchant for math, she was drawn to computational linguistics at AI for All when she created a classifier that connected people to resources during natural disasters. And next fall, Karina plans to pursue an interdisciplinary degree at Harvard or MIT. And then finally, we'll hear from Fabro Steibel. Fabro is the executive director of ITS Rio. He's also a postdoc affiliated with the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University and a member of the Global Council of the World Economic Forum. He's an independent researcher at the Open Government Partnership in Brazil, a fellow in open government by the Organization of American States, a postdoctoral fellow at the United Nations University, and a visiting researcher at the University of California, San Diego. Fabro's lightning talk will highlight Pegabot, which is a tool developed by ITS Rio to combat computational propaganda. And so at this time, I want to welcome all of our speakers up to the stage, if you would, and welcome Marc up here to the podium.
So, well, as was given in our eloquent introduction, political disinformation is not a new phenomenon. It is as old as politics and was a core part of the 20th century Cold War playbook. But disinformation for a long time was hard to do well. Even for well-resourced state agencies, you needed to have believable content and the channels through which that it could be distributed. Now, of course, occasionally channel and content would come together, such as when the Daily Mail chose to publish the Zinoviev letter about a few days before the 1924 UK general election. This letter purported to claim that the election of the Labour Party would hasten the spread of Leninism to the UK, but is now thought to be fake. Now, in those days, mass channels like newspapers were rare and they were hard to co-opt, which meant disinformation was relatively infrequent. But then the web and social media came along, and that solved the channel access problem. It's now trivially easy for millions of people to publish content that can reach almost anyone. Now, of course, with modern, more powerful technologies, political disinformation takes on new forms. In 2016, we saw the creation of false internet articles that were shared online, and the dynamics of social media allegedly caused echo chambers that led to the continual sharing and resharing of the same content. But in 2020, we'll face a new threat. We'll be able to create entirely artificial videos of public figures synthesized through the use of cutting-edge AI algorithms. These are called deepfakes. These will enable anyone with roughly the technological sophistication and funding of a seed stage startup to create extremely realistic footage of, for instance, presidential candidates saying and doing almost anything. The fact that this will be in video form matters a lot. When something is captured in video, people see it with their own eyes and hear it with their own ears. The experience is so much more visceral than anything in text, which of course is why news reporters risk life and limb for really great footage of the things that they're trying to report. And any deepfakes in 2020 will be thrown into a febrile environment. Almost all political factions are up in arms about fake news from the other side. Our politics appears more fragmented, with parties finding their historical coalitions shifting under their feet. Measured social trust is low. On top of all of this, we have a number of crucial elections coming up in the next couple of years around the world. So what are the technologies that threaten to subvert this truth? How developed are they, and who has access to them? In general, deepfakes are videos generated with deep learning techniques, hence the name. Creating a convincing fake requires two parts, a moving image and an audio track. The simple route to creating a deepfake involves face swapping. This is literally effectively extracting the face of one person and moving it onto another. Of course, more complicated methods exist, and they involve the creation of what's called a generative model so that the user can puppet their actions onto the victim's face. Audio techniques revolve around work generally from DeepMind, built on by NVIDIA, to use deep neural networks to generate speech from text. In both cases, the requirement is that you have multiple hours of relatively high-quality video and audio footage. And that's almost always true in the case of public figures. But the most concerning aspect of these technologies is the speed at which they're getting better. The technology is moving very fast. We think that in the next couple of years, we'll be able, at least sufficiently advanced actors, cutting-edge tech companies and states, will be able to generate almost pixel-perfect videos. And of course, because of the relatively open publishing of these techniques, they'll be relatively widely available and, therefore accessible to radical campaign groups, terrorists, or individuals. So here are a few brief examples from the history of deepfakes. The algorithm was initially released anonymously on Reddit. Now, this wasn't some big research project or corporate investment, but was the digital equivalent of some kid inventing a machine gun by tinkering in their garage. The first use of the technology, perhaps predictably for the internet, was the creation of celebrity adult movies. This was already quite harmful for the celebrities involved, like the Star Wars actress Daisy Ridley, who was faked into this movie. Then, in early 2018, the same technology was made available via a graphical user interface so that no coding was needed. But it didn't take long for people to think about how this could be used in the context of politics. Many of you may already have seen the video released in April in which the actor Jordan Peele impersonated Barack Obama and had his lips stitched onto a video using a combination of deepfakes and lots of professional video editing.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things.
Then, by sort of late 2018, it was possible to puppet an entire body. So you can see here in the top right corner, the person is dancing. That's the actual source. We're detecting the people at Berkeley are detecting the pose, and that's being mapped onto the target dancer in the large picture. Finally, also in late 2018, we were able to create entirely synthetic newscasters. Never mind synthetic news.
Hello, everyone. I'm an English artificial intelligence anchor. This is my very first day in Xinhua News Agency. My voice and appearance are modeled on Zhang Zhao, a real anchor with Xinhua. The development of the media industry calls for continuous innovation.
So obviously, eventually, both institutions and public consciousness will evolve to adjust their expectations of trust in video. But that could take a long time. If we look at Photoshop, we're at sort of 30 years and counting, and people still make mistakes about the images on the front covers of glossy magazines. And while we adjust, we are most at risk. The first attack could well have the largest impact, as it will take people off guard. What could an attack look like? Well, the attacker would be presumably thoughtful about these three things: who to target, where to target them, and when to target them. We believe the most sensible way to create a devastating attack would be to combine a fake video and a huge release of genuinely hacked, innocuous materials. This maximizes the confusion and makes denials harder and less believable. This should be done in the days before an election, using social media to drive the most controversial coverage at the marginal voter in key swing constituencies. So what are we trying to do about this? Well, the Alliance of Democracy, through the vehicle of the Transatlantic Commission on Electoral Integrity and faculty, are proactively designing solutions to mitigate the impact of deepfake content in a world where access to this technology has already been democratized, and this type of disinformation becomes more common. There are three parts to our approach: build public awareness, empower the press, and connect contributors. Obviously, this can only be done effectively in a partnership between technology and somebody like the Alliance for Democracies, because we need a broad umbrella to bring many parties along with us. Our strategy is built around three simple premises, or a few simple premises. In the long term, it's likely that fakes will get so good that no algorithm will be able to differentiate them from reality. The only long-term defense is a public awareness of the threat. Therefore, it's critical we educate the public as fast as possible. So far, we've done this through partnerships with the mainstream media, both sides of the Atlantic. These take the form of quizzes and other engaging content to get the public to interact with the notion of artificially generated content. So I've got an example for you here.
We have requested more agents, immigration judges, and bed space to process the sharp rise in unlawful migration fueled by our very strong economy. My administration has presented Congress with a detailed proposal to secure the border and stop the criminal gangs, drug smugglers, and human traffickers. It's a tremendous problem.
We're not going to go through all 5, but you can see that this technology has already come a very long way. Now, I don't know how many people in the room were able to tell whether those were humans or algorithms. But if you're thoughtful what you're looking for and you're in a room with, quiet room with good speakers, you can actually still distinguish them. But most of the public can't. In fact, the public will only get roughly 50% of those right. And in particular, if you were to play them down a mobile phone, even if you know what you're looking for, it's almost impossible to distinguish the real from the fake. That means we're only a very small amount of sort of stagecraft away from a believable fake, and the technology is only going to get better very fast. But in the short term, while the fakes are less than perfect, we should build tools to protect ourselves. This will empower the press and other professional participants in the democratic process and maintain a connection with truth. So our work is initially focused on creating a whole load of detection algorithms for the most commonly available types of deepfakes. And then we'll grow our ability to detect them as the sophistication of the fakes increases. And this is work we've done to detect face swaps, so the relatively simple version where you map one person's face onto another. And the bright areas indicate the regions that the detection algorithm uses to sort of pick up the indicators of falseness. Finally, the third part of our strategy is to collaborate. All of this work can be supercharged by working together. We think this is a very important problem, and we know that there are lots of people out in the Silicon Valley that are also working on aspects of it. And we'd love to combine our work with yours. So if you have data, pre-existing research, or ideas about how these things could be disseminated, we would love to talk to you. Basically, the tech industry has taken a bit of a hammering recently, and a decent chunk of that was perhaps valid, but some of it was unfair. We think that the sort of work around deepfakes is an opportunity to get ahead of a bad news story and demonstrate how the tech industry is protecting some of our most important institutions from harm. And we should work on it together for the good of our companies and for our countries. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here to present my research on using natural language processing to detect cyberbullying. So cyberbullying can be defined as willful and repeated harm inflicted through electronic means like cell phones and computers. It can happen in several different forms, most commonly through sending mean messages or threats via text message or email. It can also happen through spreading online rumors, posting or publishing hurtful messages and images through social media, and pretending to be someone else online in order to have the intent of hurting others. Over 50% of teens and adolescents have been victims of cyberbullying, and around the same proportion has engaged in the behavior. Over 1 in 3 young people have been threatened online, and over 1 in 4 have been cyberbullied repeatedly. So cyberbullying is a very real and prevalent problem. Now, while some people are actually out there to hurt others, a fair share of the population, most importantly including teens, sometimes engages in this behavior unintentionally because they're not really aware of what they're saying and they're not processing what they're sending. And this could land people in some serious consequences. On the victim side, it could lead to lower self-esteem, depression, and in very extreme cases, suicide. But also on the perpetrator side, it could land them in some potential legal hot water. And this is where Humanly comes in. So Humanly is a classifier that takes in a piece of text and identifies if it's toxic, obscene, insulting, threatening, or identity hating. And the overarching goal of Humanly is to detect and address cyberbullying in real time. So before a user hits send or publish, the algorithm can screen the text and warn or suggest if the text is toxic in any way. And this would help both unintentional and intentional perpetrators think before they speak and avoid a lot of legal and personal consequences. The overall hope of Humanly is to make the internet a safer place by reducing the amount of toxic conversation and bringing positive, healthy, and productive discussion to the forefront. A general overview of how it works is that Humanly takes in a piece of text from social media, vectorizes it into a sequence of numbers that are then passed into a machine learning model, and then using the output of that model, it then displays warnings or suggestions about the toxicity of the text. Now, Humanly isn't just a generic, oh, this is bad flag. There are different types of toxicity, including obscenity, identity hate, insults, and threats. And within those, there are various levels of severity of the threats. So a piece of text can be any or all of these types of, can contain any of these types of toxicity. And so Humanly doesn't just flag a piece of text as toxic, but it also breaks down what type or types of hate that it contains, and that gives more nuanced and helpful information to all parties. A little overview of how the model works. First, we have training data as well as training labels that are fed into a vectorizer, which turns text into numbers that can then be fed into a classifier that's trained with the data. Then, once we have our trained vectorizer and data, we're ready to pass in a raw piece of text, put it through the algorithm, and come up with a set of 6 predicted labels. Each label will be a 0 or a 1, where 0 is that it's not toxic, and then 1 is that it is toxic according to the type. So if it's a 1 for identity hate, that means yes, it contains identity hate in the text. Now, of course, no machine learning model can be built without copious amounts of data. For my project, I used training data from the Kaggle Perspective API challenge. It contained about 160,000 Wikipedia comments that were each labeled with all 6 types of toxicity. Using this data, I experimented with various vectorizers and classifiers to develop my algorithm. So some vectorizers I experimented with included the TF-IDF, or Term Frequency Inverse Document Frequency Vectorizer, which turned text into numbers based on how often each word occurred in the sentence, as well as relative to how often the word occurred in the data set. I also tried count vectorizers, which were just raw word frequency counts, as well as feature engineering, where I extracted custom features like the ratio of capital letters to length, the number of smiley faces, or the number of curse words. So those were features that I thought would contain useful information. And so I extracted them and then put them through the algorithm. For algorithms, I tried 2 main classes. First was the support vector machine, which the idea of that is that you draw a boundary between the 2 classes for each of the types of cyberbullying. And then if it's on one side of the boundary, then it is toxic. And then if it's on the other side, then it's not. So the boundaries can come in different shapes. I personally tried the linear, RBF, sigmoid, and polynomial shapes. The other algorithm I tried was naive Bayes. The idea of that is to use probability and normal distributions to construct ideas of what each class of cyberbullying looks like. And then for each piece of test data, you calculate the probability that it belongs to each class and make predictions in that way. So here are some of the results of my experiments. Out of all of the algorithms, the linear SVC, which represented the linear shape of a support vector machine boundary, worked the best. And within that, the default TF-IDF vectorizer, as well as the hashing vectorizer, appeared to perform comparably and better than the others. So with that information, I then tested a few more parameters within the linear SVC. From these results, we can see that all of the options have similar accuracies, but they have a few more differences. So here, with the linear SVC, I first tried the default TF-IDF vectorizer. I also tried the default hashing vectorizer. I also tried the hashing vectorizer with a norm L2, which normalized all the vectors by dividing by their length. And then lastly, I tried the TF-IDF vectorizer with 2 modifications. The first modification was sublinear TF, which added a little log function to the term frequency calculation to normalize it a bit. And I also tried preserving all of the capital letters. So the standard procedure for processing these texts is to convert everything to lowercase so that everything is standardized. But capital letters could indicate that the person is screaming or angry, so I thought that would contain some important information. And I thought I should test what would happen if I preserve that. So as we can see here in our results, the TF-IDF vectorizer appears to have some higher precision values, but the hashing it has higher recall, and the hashing vectorizer has higher precision. In this case, the precision score is asking, out of all of the text that we classified as toxic, how much of it is actually toxic? So basically, how much OK text did we actually misclassify as toxic? Whereas recall is asking, out of all the text that is actually toxic, how much did we pick up? And so in this case, it's much more important that we prioritize recall because we want to pick up as much toxic text as possible, and we want people to think as much as they can before they speak. So it's less dangerous to over-warn people than to under-warn them. And so with that, I went with the TF-IDF with the modification. And with that, I have my final model. I take training data, pass it through the modified TF-IDF vectorizer, and then train it through the classifier. And using that, I have text, pass it through the algorithm, and come up with my predicted labels. Here is a quick demo of my system. Oh, there we go. So I typed hello, and it says cool because it's not toxic. I try something a little worse. It says it's toxic, it's obscene, insulting. And then I try something a little worse. Again, detects the toxicity, obscenity, insult, and it detects the identity hate. And then lastly, I try a threat, and it detects the threat. So that's a basic idea of how it works. And just wrapping up a little bit about what's next for Humanly. I hope to do more experiments, as well as implement this on different social media platforms. So each social media platform has its own lingo, and so with each platform, I would have to obtain training data for that specific platform and then go from there. I also hope to extend Humanly into multiple languages, as well as potentially transcribe speech to text instead of just text. And with that, my project is at this link. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fabro. We have done in Brazil the Pegabot, or bot catcher. It's now in Mexico and Colombia. And to explain the Pegabot, which is an algorithm, I will use a movie. So I hope I don't spoil the life of anyone. You probably saw this movie. So you see the movie when they say, I see dead people? You should have seen. At the beginning of the movie and at the end, you understand dead people in a different way. And that's very important for what we're trying to do, because we're trying to do Pegabot is a media literacy tool to achieve that people understand the bots around them. Like the beginning of the movie, that people was one thing, imagine bots are one thing, and then later on you can understand and see the bots around you. So one of the tenets of a project is that we never speak only bad about bots, because we believe bots has a role in society. So these are she-bots. The one side is Alda, is ours, the other one is Beta. And these bots are used for civic participation. So the Pegabot, or the bot catcher, cannot be about banning bots from the internet, and this is one tenet. At the same time, we want to make sure that people can catch bots. So when we were designing the Pegabot, this is the home screen if you type in pegabot.com.br, we wanted to make sure that the search bar is exactly in the middle of the screen, because we believe that you has an interest in understanding the bots around you. So this is something we did. After you type in, and then you see someone, I give you percentage of the likelihood that your Twitter profile is a bot or not, and I try to explain you what a bot is, or what a bot can be. So this is simulations we did. On your right, you have the current president of Brazil. This was for the election, so by then he was not a president. He has 34% of the chance of being a bot. And you have Rosie. Rosie is another she-bot. And she is a bot, and she has 51% of chances of being a bot. And we use this as testing models to try to understand what we're trying to portray to people. Because if you want to know if it's a bot, it's a bot. I probably cannot deliver you the answer. The thing is, you have to understand what makes a bot a bot. So the presidential candidate Twitter profile is associated to network of bots, but the bot itself, the profile itself, is not a bot. Rosie, she is a bot, but the way she behaves is so well designed that it doesn't behave as a bot. She interacts with people and so on. So I said, no matter what I do, I have to explain to people that what a bot behavior actually is. So what's the challenge? The challenge here, and then I get a wired animated GIF to use it, is that we need to show people to see and understand content being produced by bots online so they can have a decision, they can have a voice in saying if they want to accept it, if they want to react to that or not. We also know that at one point of debate, any bot behavior is too late. So this is the Muslim selfie, German case. The other one is a kid gaze, a Brazilian case. When a political debate becomes about the essence of the image and the debate, it's too late. We need to make like a vaccine for people to understand the bots before the debate becomes so enhanced and so entrenched with misinformation. So we went to the market and we tried to see partial answers we could find over there. We knew what we did. So this is a report. We released it during the presidential campaign, during the second ballot. It's the only report there where we document computational propaganda in WhatsApp, which is big in Brazil. And this is related to the Supreme Court that might relate to impeachment eventually. In April now, WhatsApp released a report, and they basically say the same thing we did is that WhatsApp can be used as a broadcast mechanism. It's a social cast mechanism, but can be used as a broadcast if used in a computational propaganda way properly. And we said, these reports are great, but they don't deliver the media literacy part. They don't translate ownership in the user because we tell them, the public, what the answer is. And people cannot say the bot that is just talk to him or the bot that he follows. We need something different. This is the botometer. It's one of the famous algorithms that you can use to understand bot behavior. And we look at this and we look at this case and like it very much. There are some things that we said we want to try different. The first one is that the algorithm needs to be open. And opening an algorithm is not only a matter of code, it's also a matter of who runs the algorithms and how do you explain the implications of that. And we also want to make sure the search bar is at the middle of the screen and not, we don't say who we are, we give you the power to understand what you want to do. And the third thing we understood is that journalists were doing a massive work in understanding the bot behavior. So this is one of the main investigative journals in Brazil. What you see there is a picture of SIM cards. They're using personal data to create SIM cards and then to create a zombie factory, a click farm factory to influence elections. And we said, we need to support the journalists. And how to do that? We said, well, let's do the Pegabot. So the Pegabot is 4 parts. You only see one of them. The first one is about the user. So the user can go there right now and click and find a bot, if it's a bot or not. Around 20,000 people use the tool, either we like it or not, which suggests for us there is a supply for that and a demand for that. People want to use these tools. We have been tools that for Instagram, I found one yesterday, we have for Twitch, we have for others. We also saw there was an opportunity here to Pegabot to understand Latin America. One of the things we struggled when creating the algorithms was about the Portuguese language. Very few algorithms are training for a language pack to speak Portuguese. And this is one thing that we're not quite sure if we got that yet. So I said, how about Spanish? So the Atrapabot, which will be another version, now is in Mexico, in Colombia, being used by users to try to understand bots around them. And this is a problem. And the problem is because someone decided to run an analysis in Mexico and tried to run the same analysis in Brazil, and he was resulted with different percentages. So I said, we need to improve our transparency because we know language matters, but how do we give transparency to people that language actually matters? And then at the end, right now, the project has 4 sides. One of them is the website where you can enter and check, and then I explain if, how likely you are to be a bot and why. But one thing that we know is that we need to advance the open algorithm part. It's not clear to people why the algorithm works, what makes a bot or not. So we want to feedback. So when you go and search for a bot, I want to be able to tell in your behavior what your behavior is similar to a bot behavior and what does not, and get your followers and do it. We have done analysis that internally on huge bot cases, and this is really useful to tell people what a bot behavior can be. The second thing is that we cannot work alone. So we will be helping journalists to do investigative analysis so they can go and check the profile, check the person, maybe go to someone's address or check social media so they can report back on these bot behaviors. And also NGOs. So in terms of gender, we know there are bots who hit women. And then we're working in partnership with gender rights NGOs and helping them explain their ecosystems on the use of bots as haters or trolls, and with women candidates as well. And lastly, evidence-based regulation. Brazil is a country where the Supreme Court has pretty active internet regulation. We have blocked the internet 4 times so far. We have right to be forgotten, cryptography cases are really hard-hitting, like India, and that can shape the future of the internet alike. So we want to make sure that any discussion about bot behavior is based on good evidence. And it's very hard to have good evidence that can be understood by judges. That said, let me give you 2 sad news of things I cannot do right now, and I wish you can help me. The first one is a NATO report that's showing that 70% of the bots in one particular area, one particular case, were simple bots. Simple bots, they're pretty dumb. My algorithm is quite good to get dumb bots, but they're not good to get very complex and very diverse types of bots that mix humans and machines. And what the report also knows is there has been a decrease in simple bots in the environment, the ecosystems, and an increase of more sophisticated bots. So maybe I have a tool that will have in this Cold War against the bots to quickly be updated and quickly be challenging about new ways to give transparency to the bots, to the bot factor. If you get the deepfake system where it's impossible to know if a bot's a bot or not, I'm doomed. And on your right, you see a woman from Brazil. So one of the magazines just run last week an analysis with Botometer on bots. And they said, look, the current president has a bot network. And they said, this profile at number is a bot. And then that's the bot. So that is someone, a human. She started using social media in the past year. She has obsessive behavior. She tweets lots of times a day, and she replicates someone. She has a bot behavior. But then she came forward with a picture of a calendar, replicating that she's real, and here is the date, I'm alive, and so on. So every time you make a false positive to the public, you increase the mistrust in the system. And this is a problem that we try to address. So far, Pegabot has been helping lots of people in a distributed way, in a platform system, to try to understand the bots around them. I'm not saying it's perfect, it's not. Right now, we are going to put it in pause just after my talk, because we need to go back to the lab, and we need to make the algorithm more powerful and more transparent. But I'm saying that if you do your job, and you get all organizations, if you get news organizations together, you can give transparency to the people and then promote media literacy and, most importantly, ownership. Because it doesn't matter if I know what a bot is or I can understand a bot network, if people, my grandma, cannot understand what a bot is. So that's the challenge. How do we make people aware of what a bot is? Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to all of you for those very illuminating presentations. I think we're a little bit light on time for sort of a deep synthesis or reflections, but I do just want to acknowledge that, one, I found that to be very encouraging. I think each of these presentations sort of highlights the role that technology is playing in many ways to exacerbate major challenges confronting democracy and society. But the ways that technology is also helping to advance solutions across these challenges. But most importantly, perhaps, also just sort of highlights and underscores the value of the human-centered focus of today's conversation, whether it's sort of across linguistics or the sociocultural context or sort of the multi-stakeholder collaborative approach to solving these problems. I think that this is sort of a very encouraging illustration of how that collaborative approach is surfacing and contributing to a way forward and to tech-augmented approaches to meeting some of these challenges. And sort of in that spirit of collaboration, I know that there are a number of collaborative works that are afoot that are, many of which are represented here. And Marc referenced sort of the Transatlantic Council and the Alliance for Democracies, which is a great effort. I'd also like to highlight the Design for Democracy Coalition at d4dcoalition.org for anyone who is interested in sort of collaborating with the global democracy community around some of these challenges. But again, I just want to thank our terrific presenters for sort of sharing these perspectives and these tools, and thank them for their important contributions to this work as well. So please.